So the rematch for the heavyweight title of the world, Stipe Miocic versus Francis Ngannou. Obviously in the first match Stipe had his way with Francis, but I just feel like Stipe has been around that top a little bit too long at heavyweight. There's only so long you can go at heavyweight. He has the record for the most title defense. Obviously picked up the loss against Daniel Cormier before beating him twice, but you will find it very hard to fight 10 rounds against Francis Ngannou and not get knocked out. So I think that's what's going to happen here. I just think, I think Stipe will be winning the fight until Francis wins it. And that could be in 10 seconds or it could be in 10 minutes. But I think Francis will do it. I think Francis will catch Stipe and end up knocking him out to win the UFC heavyweight title.
Stipe Miocic and Francis Ngannou. Now, full disclosure, I picked Stipe Miocic in their very first fight, and I was right about that. In the rematch, I'm going to take Francis Ngannou. We're a couple years removed from the first fight. I think Ngannou's found a much better fit for him right now at Extreme Couture, getting to work with Eric Nixick. I think we're seeing a much more evolved Francis Ngannou than we had in the past. And as much as Stipe's the GOAT, I'm not going to debate that. I think he's amazing, and I think he can win this fight. I just don't know if he can take a Francis Ngannou shot a couple years removed, and also having that knockout loss in between to Daniel Cormier. So I think all Francis needs to do is get one shot and it's over. And I think with Stipe, it's much harder for him to win. I do think this fight's a little bit closer than people are thinking, but I am going to go with Ngannou because I think that power is going to be too much for Stipe this time around. I think he gets the win by first or second round knockout.
So I would favor Stipe almost any other scenario. The fact that it is in the apex, in the tiny octagon, less room to work, that pushes it slightly over the edge for Francis Ngannou because that is a lot less room for Stipe to get out of the way. So I favor Stipe in the tiny octagon. I favor Stipe in the big octagon. I favor Francis in the small octagon. But Stipe has looked one of those fighters that game plans like no one else. So I think it's a lot closer than people think, but I slightly favor Francis.
It's interesting, right? A lot of times with rematches, we think of what happened the first time and we're so willing to jump in and say, oh, that's what's going to happen this time. But for me, I'm going to have to say Francis Ngannou goes out there and gets it done. I think he'll get it done by knockout. Other than the Miocic fight and the Derek Lewis stumble, he's been invincible. So I'm going to say Francis gets it done inside the distance with punches.
Okay, we all know how the first one went. Everyone knows the first one. Everyone goes, oh, Stipe just ragdolled Francis. I didn't actually see it that way. I saw the first one has an inexperienced Francis Ngannou not being able to control his aggression and control his cardio in a long 25-minute championship fight. I believe this is going to be a better version of Francis Ngannou, a more well-rounded version, a more patient version. And I will pick Francis Ngannou to take the heavyweight title away from Stipe Miocic with a second-round knockout.
Let me start by saying I have been on the Stipe Miocic bandwagon since his Fabio Maldonado win back in 2014. I picked him in basically every fight since then. The Francis fight, all 3 Daniel Cormier fights, but I'm admittedly a little nervous. Stipe took a lot of damage in those 3 Daniel Cormier fights. The first one was a knockout. The second 2, although he won, were 2 big wars of attrition, especially the middle fight in that series. The early rounds, he was taking a lot of abuse. Francis Ngannou basically had no damage against him in the Derek Lewis fight and then proceeded to finish 4 guys super quick. I'm looking at this more in terms of their overall health bars. I think Stipe's got an uphill battle to climb. In that sense, I am so regrettably going to take Francis Ngannou, and that's not because he's not a terrific guy. It's just because Stipe is one of those guys that I earmarked very early, and that is a very rare treat for me.
The thing that makes this fight difficult to handicap is that we haven't seen a whole lot of Ngannou. Like, he's won his fights since, I think with the exception of the Derek Lewis fight, which we tend to forget ever happened for multiple reasons. We've seen him go out and shock like some of the best fighters ever. But we haven't seen him that much. We've seen him for like a few seconds here and there. He's been off now for well over a year. It's really difficult for me to pick him right now, considering I have zero idea if his wrestling defense has improved. I have zero idea whether or not his cardio has improved. On the other hand, we've seen Stipe go almost the distance with Daniel Cormier in one time at UFC 241. take a lot of damage, sustain a beating through most of that, and then come back, make the adjustments and win. And then we saw him outlast Daniel Cormier yet again, and this time to a decision. And I've seen Stipe improve. I've seen Stipe go back at it. I haven't seen enough from Ngannou. So for that reason, I think the same thing happens. Stipe Miocic should out-wrestle, out-position, and outlast Francis Ngannou for another win.
Stipe Miocic versus Francis Ngannou 2 is, I mean, it's got all the tension of the first one, right? Francis has done exactly what he did the first time, just knocked people out in seconds, while Stipe has had these grueling battles with Daniel Cormier. One X factor to this rematch is they're in the small cage at the apex. Now, I don't know if that helps Miocic close the gap and get that wrestling that he clearly needs to, or does it help Ngannou spring across the cage and just smash him to bits? I am going... You know what? I was going to say Ngannou, but I'm going to say Stipe Miocic. I think at this point, similarly to Amanda Nunes, Valentina Shevchenko, he's just continued to win. And so in that regard, it's kind of wrong to pick against him at this stage of his career. So I will say Stipe Miocic.
It depends, I think. It depends on if Stipe has taken enough damage since then to where his chin will not be able to handle any of those Ngannou bombs, which it surprisingly was in the first fight. But I think that for the most part, it will probably look pretty similar to that first fight. Maybe Ngannou plays it a little bit safer and conserves his energy as the fight goes on. But I don't know. Stipe, I think, proved to be the key to how to beat Ngannou, and nothing has told us since then that Ngannou has improved what he needs to be able to beat Stipe.
I picked Ngannou to win the first time, and I think I'm going to do it again. I think Ngannou's wrestling is a little bit underrated. I know anyone's going to look back at the first fight between them is going to say, "Oh, Stipe mauled him, completely controlled him for 25 minutes," but it actually it was a great effort by Stipe to control him for that long, and there's a reason he couldn't finish. He's a great wrestler. I think Ngannou has improved. How much? It's hard to say. His fights have been so short, but I think enough that he gets the job done, and this time he does land one of those big shots and becomes a champion.
I think we're looking at a repeat here. If you guys saw the first fight, I mean, the wrestling was the key for Stipe. Why change anything up at this point? I think Francis always has that threat of knocking someone out, and he certainly hit Stipe with some good shots, but Stipe has shown he knows how to deal with that already. So it's going to be much of a rinse and repeat kind of blueprint. So I think Stipe retains as well. He'll probably walk away with another decision.
I've been flipping back and forth on this one. I'm a believer in Stipe, but it's one of those fights where, on paper, it's really close, but it's not going to be close off paper. Either Stipe is going to grind him out like the first fight, and Ngannou just won't have that wrestling defense to change the outcome of the first fight back in 2018, or Ngannou's going to land one of his patented bombs and knock out Stipe. Flip a coin here. I'll go Stipe, but, it really could go either way.
This one is so hard because we haven't actually seen the changes. We haven't actually seen the improvements, but we also haven't seen anybody make Francis Ngannou show us the improvements. His power is absolutely terrifying. He did hit Stipe Miocic with some good shots in that first fight. And I think we get a new champion. I think this is the one where he's figured out kind of how to utilize and how to weaponize his athleticism, his power, his speed a little bit better than even he did in those early days. And I think we see a new champion and maybe a very long dominant reign for the Predator, Francis Ngannou.
Man, I know the sexy pick for this fight is Francis Ngannou, going in there and being able to knock out Stipe Miocic. But I feel that this long extended break for Stipe Miocic is only benefiting Stipe Miocic and not actually benefiting Francis Ngannou. And I feel like Stipe will go in there and pretty much do the same exact thing that he did in the first fight against Francis. And I know people are gonna be like you said, be all in the DMs about the pick, but hey, I feel like Stipe is gonna keep that title.
This one is so hard because how do you pick against Francis Ngannou? The guy that's a guy you don't want to bet against. But then Stipe in the first fight just could take the punches and out wrestled him. We still don't even know if Francis' wrestling's any good, since like he hasn't been attempted to take down because he knocks at everyone and it. I'll say Francis gets it done. I'll say Francis lands a shot. I think Stipe's chin isn't as strong as it was after that Francis fight. Like Daniel Cormier knocked him out. Cormier rocked him a few times. I think Ngannou connects on something big and knocks him out.
Fightful.com